There is a woman in your life right now. Maybe someone you already know, maybe someone you recently met. And she is waiting, without realizing it herself, for you to ask her something no man ever has. She will not tell you this. She probably cannot articulate it. But somewhere underneath the surface of every conversation she has ever had with a man, there is a quiet wish that someone would actually reach for her. Not with flattery, not with impressive stories, not with carefully rehearsed lines, but with a question that proves he sees her. Most men never ask that question, not because they are not interested, because nobody ever showed them what it looks like. You have probably walked away from conversations with women that felt fine, polite, even pleasant, without realizing that something was already there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. You did not miss it because you were not attractive enough, or confident enough, or interesting enough. You missed it because you were focused on the wrong thing entirely. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly which 6 questions unlock genuine attraction in a woman, why they work at a level most men never consider, and how to use them in a way that feels completely natural, not scripted, not rehearsed, real. Most men walk into a conversation with a woman trying to say the right thing. That is already the wrong goal. She is not listening for what you say. She is feeling for what you notice. This is a distinction that changes everything once you actually understand it, and it is one of the most consistent patterns in how women experience attraction. Women do not primarily respond to what a man tells them about himself. They respond to what a man's attention reveals about him. The way he listens, the things he chooses to ask about, the moments he decides are worth exploring further. When a woman feels genuinely seen in conversation, not complimented, not entertained, but actually seen, something shifts in how she experiences the man she is talking to. Researchers who study interpersonal attraction have noted that the feeling of being truly understood by another person activates the same neural pathways associated with emotional bonding. In plain terms, feeling seen feels good in a way that is almost indistinguishable from the early stages of attraction. The problem is that most men approach conversation with women in one of 2 ways. They either interview her, rapid questions that feel more like data collection than connection, or they perform for her, filling the space with their own stories, their own humor, their own personality, hoping something lands. Neither of these creates the experience of being seen. One puts her on trial, the other makes her an audience. The question is not what to say. The question has always been what to ask. And not just any question, the specific kind that signals, without you ever stating it, that you are the kind of man who pays attention to what actually matters. So if the goal is not to impress her, but to see her in a way she rarely gets seen, then the first question you need to understand is the one that shows her you already pay attention. The first question is not one most men would think to ask. It does not sound clever. It does not require research. It only requires that you actually paid attention to her before you spoke. Think about what most opening questions look like. What do you do? Where are you from? How do you know the people here? These are not bad questions. They are just neutral. They tell a woman nothing about how you see her specifically. They are the conversational equivalent of filling out a form. The observation question is different because it is built from something you actually noticed, something particular to her, not a category she belongs to. Not, you seem like you travel a lot, based on nothing. More like noticing that she lit up slightly when the conversation touched on a specific subject, then asking about that subject directly. Or noticing something she said in passing that revealed what she values, and asking her to say more about it. What this does psychologically is significant. It tells her you were already listening before the question was asked. It signals presence, which is rarer than most men realize. And it positions you immediately as someone who operates differently from the men she normally talks to. Of course, context matters here. An observation question only works if the observation is genuine. If you reach for something you did not actually notice, it reads as a technique, and women are exceptionally good at detecting the difference between someone who is performing interest and someone who actually has it. The most common mistake men make with this is waiting too long to use it. They let the conversation settle into pleasantries for 10 minutes before trying to go somewhere real. By then, a pattern has been established. She is already relating to you in a particular register, and shifting it requires more effort than simply starting there. One specific, genuine observation turned into a question in the first few minutes of conversation. That is the difference between a conversation she remembers and one she forgets before she gets home. That question works in the opening moments, but attraction does not hold still. It either deepens or it fades. The second question is what keeps it moving forward. When a woman gives you an answer, she is often testing something. Not deliberately, not strategically. She is feeling whether you actually want to know, or whether you were just filling silence. Most conversations between men and women stay shallow for a simple reason. Men accept the first answer a woman gives and move on. She says she works in marketing, and he asks what kind of marketing. She says she recently moved to the city, and he asks where from. The conversation progresses, but it never arrives anywhere. She gives surface answers because he only seems to want surface answers. The depth invitation changes this. It is a question that takes her first answer and gently asks her to go one level deeper. Not because you need more information, but because her first answer suggested there was something worth understanding more fully. The phrasing matters enormously here. There is a difference between why, which can feel interrogating, and something like, what does that actually mean for you? Or, how did you end up there? The first demands justification. The second creates space. One is a courtroom, the other is a conversation. What happens when a woman is genuinely invited to go deeper is worth understanding. She is not used to it. Most people, men and women, are not accustomed to being asked to elaborate on their own experience. When it happens, it feels like a small gift. She expands. She says things she had not planned to say. She starts to feel, perhaps slightly unconsciously, that you are someone she can actually talk to, which is not a small thing. For a lot of women, feeling like they can genuinely talk to a man is itself a form of attraction. Now, you might be thinking, is this not just good listening? And yes, partly. But good listening is the foundation, not the technique. The depth invitation is the moment you act on what you heard. It is the proof that you are paying attention. One instance of this is interesting. A pattern of it across a single conversation is genuinely rare, and she will feel that. Going deeper is one thing, but there is a specific kind of question that does not just invite her to open up. It makes her feel like you already understand her before she has finished explaining. This is the question that women will think about later. Not because it is romantic, because it will make her feel, possibly for the first time in a long time, like someone actually saw what she meant, not just what she said. There is a distinction between feeling heard and feeling understood, and it is not a subtle one. Feeling heard means someone registered your words. Feeling understood means someone grasped what you were actually trying to express, the meaning underneath the words, the thing you were reaching for that you may not have fully articulated yourself. The mirror question creates that experience. It takes something a woman has implied, but not stated directly, and reflects it back to her as a question. Not a summary, not a paraphrase, a question built from the gap between what she said and what she seemed to mean. This requires real listening. The kind most people do not do because they are simultaneously composing their next response while the other person is still talking. You have to actually let her words land before you do anything with them. And then, instead of responding to what she said, you respond to what it suggested. An example of how this sounds in practice. She tells you she left a career she spent years building because it stopped feeling like hers. You do not say, "That must have been hard." You ask, "Was there a specific moment when you realized it had become someone else's idea of you?" That question could only come from someone who heard not just what she said, but what she meant. She did not use those words. You found them by actually listening. Now, I want to be honest about something here. This question is genuinely difficult to manufacture. It cannot be scripted in advance because it depends entirely on what she says. The only way to ask a good mirror question is to be fully present in the conversation. Not planning, not performing, just actually there. That is, in fact, part of why it works so well. The question itself is evidence of presence. And presence, for most women, is the quality they describe most often when asked what first made them feel something shift. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video, that there was a question so powerful it would make her feel seen before she had even finished speaking. We have just arrived at it. The first 3 questions build something, a kind of quiet momentum. But momentum alone is not attraction. There has to be a moment where she feels something shift. That is what question 4 is designed to do. Most conversations between men and women stay in the shallows because neither person asks anything that requires a real answer. This question requires a real answer. That is precisely why it works. The values reveal question invites a woman to say out loud what actually matters to her, in life, in relationships, in the way she spends her time. Not abstractly, specifically. Questions like, what is something you used to think was important that you have completely let go of? Or, what would you refuse to compromise on, even if it cost you something? These are not first date interview questions. They are questions that signal you are interested in what she is actually made of, not what she does for work or where she grew up. What this question does for you, as the man asking it, is equally important. It signals your own emotional maturity. A man who wants to know what a woman values is a man who has considered what he values. The question reveals something about you simply by virtue of the fact that you thought to ask it. Women rarely get asked what they value by men who are attracted to them. They get asked what they like, what they want to do, where they want to go. Those are preference questions. A values question is different in kind. It asks her to be real in a way that most conversations never require. Of course, timing matters significantly here. This question lands best when some warmth has already been established in the conversation, when you have already shown through the earlier questions that you are someone who pays genuine attention. Asked too early, it can feel clinical. Asked at the right moment, it feels like recognition. Question 5 is shorter, simpler, and it will likely surprise you because it does not sound like an attraction strategy at all. You are going to read this question and think it is too simple. I am asking you to hold that reaction and keep reading. The silence invitation is not a sophisticated question in the traditional sense. It is a brief, open question followed by something most men cannot offer: genuine, unhurried patience. Something like, what are you not saying? Or, what part of that are you still working out? These questions create space for a woman to say something she has not yet decided to say. They signal that you are not in a rush, that you are not going to fill every pause with your own voice, that you actually want to hear what is underneath the answer she just gave you. Most men fill silence out of anxiety. The moment a conversation pauses, they jump in, with another question, with a comment, with something to keep the energy moving. This is understandable. Silence in conversation can feel like failure. But for a woman who has spent years having conversations where she was never quite given enough room, a man who holds space without rushing her does something she has almost never experienced. Psychologists who study conversational dynamics refer to this as tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to sit comfortably with an open moment rather than closing it prematurely. In a social context, people with high tolerance for ambiguity are consistently rated as better listeners, more trustworthy, and more emotionally intelligent. The silence invitation is, in essence, a demonstration of this quality. You might be thinking this one feels passive, that attraction requires forward energy, not stillness. But what silence actually communicates is confidence. A man who does not need to fill every gap is a man who is comfortable in himself. That comfort is attractive in a way that is difficult to articulate, but immediately felt. All 5 of those questions build attraction, but there is one question, the 6th, that women themselves rarely understand why it affects them the way it does. That is the one I saved for last. Every other question in this video is about seeing her. This one is different. This one is about being real with her. And that distinction is what makes it the most powerful of all. There is a pattern that happens when a man is attracted to a woman that is almost universal and almost always works against him. He agrees with everything she says. He mirrors her opinions. He laughs at everything, even if nothing was particularly funny. He softens every edge of his own perspective to avoid creating friction. He does this because he wants her to like him, and he unconsciously believes that the path to being liked is to never challenge anything. What he does not realize is that women read this pattern immediately, and what they feel when they read it is not warmth. It is a subtle, quiet deflation. Because a man who never disagrees with you is a man who is not really engaging with you. He is performing agreement, and she can feel that it is a performance. The sixth question is one that, respectfully, curiously, genuinely pushes back on something she has said. Not to be contrary, not to show dominance, but to engage with her as a thinking person rather than someone whose approval you are trying to earn. Something like, I hear you, but I am curious. Did you always feel that way, or did something change? Or, that is interesting because I would have assumed the opposite. What am I missing? These questions do something remarkable. They tell her that you take her ideas seriously enough to actually engage with them, that you are present enough to have your own response, and honest enough to share it. The tone that makes this land is critical. There is a version of this that sounds like a debate, and a version that sounds like genuine curiosity. What you are going for is the second one. Not, are you sure about that? But, I want to understand this better because my instinct was different. One closes, the other opens. Here is what women consistently describe after a conversation that activated real attraction. They say it felt like talking to someone who was actually there, not performing, not managing, just genuinely present and genuinely honest. That is what the sixth question creates, and it is the reason I saved it for last, because without the foundation of the first five, it can feel abrasive. With that foundation, it feels like the most real moment of the conversation. 6 questions, all of them simple, none of them requiring anything you do not already have. What they require is attention, genuine, sustained, focused attention on the actual person in front of you. The unified truth running through all 6 of these is this: women are not turned on by what you say. They are turned on by what your questions reveal about you. The observation question reveals that you pay attention. The depth invitation reveals that you are genuinely curious. The mirror question reveals that you listen beyond the words. The values reveals that you care about substance. The silence invitation reveals that you are comfortable enough in yourself to create space. And the 6th question reveals that you are honest enough to engage with her as a real person. Together, they build something she has likely experienced rarely, if ever. A conversation where she felt fully present in, rather than half performing for. You do not need to deploy all 6 in a single conversation. You do not need to treat this as a sequence to execute. The moment you start thinking about attraction as a system to run, it stops feeling real, and she will feel that too. What you are doing is changing how you approach a conversation at the level of intention. You are deciding that you are there to actually see her, and these questions are what that looks like in practice. I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to know your answer. Think about one woman in your life right now, someone you know, someone you recently met, someone you hope to meet, and tell me in the comments, which of these 6 questions do you think she has never once been asked by anyone? I read every comment on this channel. The answers people leave on videos like this one are almost always more revealing than people realize. If this conversation gave you something real, consider staying connected to this channel. What we look at here is not surface advice. It is the underlying psychology, why women behave the way they do, what actually moves them, and what you can understand now that most men never will. In the next video, I am going to show you something that most men completely misread. Because the moment a woman actually becomes attracted, her behavior often looks like the opposite of interest. And if you do not know what is happening in that window, you will walk away from the exact moment you have been waiting for.